introduction. I've never been so impressed with myself. Just, I really appreciate that. It's very nice. I'm glad to be here, as I said, and I think what I'd like to do is just start with a meditation first, and then we'll get into the message. So I invite you to find a comfortable position and let yourself begin to relax. As we focus our attention on our breathing, we are feeling our oneness with the atmosphere all around us. We are participating in that atmosphere, and we are breathing in that atmosphere that supports not only our lives, but the lives of all sentient creatures on this planet. We feel the breath of life. We are grateful to be alive, to be here on this beautiful planet with all its challenges. It is also a place of beauty and a place of love. We relax into the truth that we are supported by the universe, an infinite source of the universe that is continually expressing in us, as us, and through us. As we feel our breathing, we feel that life has rhythm. We feel that it has oneness. We feel that life, the universe, God, the truth, is harmony and order and oneness. And we let those ideas fill our consciousness now. Harmony, order, and oneness. We feel oneness as love, as interconnection, as a recognition that we are supported by the universe and that we seek to be like that universe, to be like that truth and that source, and to support each other. Harmony, order, oneness. So you focus on that, those ideas of harmony, order, and oneness. You can feel them in your body. You can feel throughout our bodies this harmonizing flow, this divine love, this perfect order that is expressed in us, through us, and as us, as these bodies, and in our consciousness. We open ourselves to experience that. We let ourselves simply be with that. Not only receptive and surrendering to the harmony, order, and oneness, but also being instruments. We set the intention. We set the intention to act in ways that are aligned with that divine harmony, order, and oneness. We feel it in our bones. We feel it in the cells of our bodies. We feel it at every point in consciousness, not just the consciousness of the body, but our consciousness of the universe all around us. Harmony, order, and oneness. As we let go and as we are open, we feel the support of that. We feel that we are not alone. We feel that we are interconnected. We feel that we are both the support and supported by the allness, the oneness, the harmony, the order, spirit. These are just some of the divine qualities and divine ideas that are within us and all around us. We open ourselves to perceive them and feel them and know them. We now take a few moments to simply be with the truth in the silence, to feel that flow within us and radiating from us, that harmony, order, oneness, love, life, light. radiate from you now. Know that this radiation spreads into the atmosphere and encompasses the globe, and everyone you think of is now enfolded in and filled with that harmony, order, love, life, light of spirit. We now let go and know in the silence. We bring our attention now back to this place and this experience that we are co-creating together in consciousness. We're filled with gratitude and joy. The Spirit of God is working mightily in us, through us, and as us to bless and harmonize our world, and we are grateful for that opportunity and responsibility, that presence and power. We pray this in the Christ consciousness. So it is. Amen.
Amen.
So, one of the things that I hold to be true, be a sort of absolute truth, I'm not the only one that holds this, obviously, but the idea that the truth that everything is interconnected. And so I'm going to talk a little bit today about, and in one of those interesting connections that connects us in unity to a movement, a teaching that originated 2,500 years ago, 2.5 millennia ago. There was a man named Pythagoras. Now, you might know of Pythagoras from high school geometry when you studied the Pythagorean theorem. If you're familiar with the movie The Wizard of Oz, when the Scarecrow gets a brain, the first thing he does is he states the Pythagorean theorem. I don't know if you remember that or not. I won't go into what the theorem is, but just that might be one way you know of him. But he's actually quite a remarkable individual and started a remarkable community that made major contributions to not only to mathematics, but also to music theory and science as we know it today, and metaphysics and mysticism. So it's he's quite a legendary figure, and part of the challenge of knowing anything about Pythagoras is that the community didn't really keep records. There weren't any documents. It's kind of a word of mouth legendary sort of thing that's come down to us through the ages. Some of the later Pythagoreans did write about the theories, but Pythagoras himself did not. And so he's quite a legendary figure. It's difficult to sort out fact from fiction. The situation is not, is actually fairly similar to our situation with someone like Jesus, about whom we know some things historically, but there are other things that are a little bit fuzzy as far as, strictly speaking, historical records and that sort of thing. So there's a certain amount of, controversy surrounding these figures today because of the uncertainty about who they were. But so I'll just talk to you as if the legends were true, I guess, as a way of talking about Pythagoras and showing the connections between Pythagoras and actually Jesus and his early community, as well as our modern unity and new thought. So one of the things that people said about Pythagoras is that he was a wonder worker. It's the same thing that people said about Jesus. It was said that he could control the winds, that he could cure the sick, that he could communicate with animals like St. Francis. There's even a legend that at least one Pythagorean raised someone from the dead. So there's all these, ancient legends about the powers of Pythagoras. There's some things that we know with a fair amount of certainty. One is that he was born on an island near southwest Turkey. The island was called, what we call Turkey today, was then Asia Minor. The island was called Samos. And he was not the type of person to just hang around at home and fit in. He started traveling around the world trying to learn as much as he could from other cultures. So he traveled to, according to the legends anyway, he traveled to Babylonia to learn about astronomy. He traveled to Phoenicia to learn what they knew and about mathematics, and also to Egypt to learn what they knew. And then about the age of 40, Pythagoras moved to a town called Croton, which was in southern Italy. And he went there and he just started giving speeches in a public square, and soon he attracted a following. Back in those days, people would just get out in the middle of they'd get on there. They didn't really literally have soapboxes, but that was kind of what it was. People would gather around them as they were speaking. Well, he attracted a large group of people, and what he taught was what's usually referred to as a way of life, sort of an interesting connection of Jesus was called the Way, and his original followers were called followers of the Way. And that's kind of what the Pythagoreans were known as well. Now, Pythagoras founded a community and founded a society, really, and it was a spiritual community. It was a community of learning. One of the very unusual things about his community was that it included both women and men, and people could join this community. They'd have to go through different kinds of initiations to learn the different levels of the teachings. And many of the people who lived in that community later went on to become political leaders in other communities. Pythagoras also had ideas about how to organize society as part of what that community was. One of the interesting things about them was that they held all property in common. No one had their own property. They also had they shared their meals in common. So in this way, they set up a model for what was later established among the Essenes. You might have heard about the Essenes, a community within Judaism before the time of Jesus and during the time of Jesus. And also the story has it that that's the way the early disciples of Jesus lived. They shared common meals, and they held all property in common, according to the book of Acts. So the way his set up his society was kind of a model for various other later communal experiments, I guess you could say. He was reputed to be an expert on all religious rituals, something that may be not of that much interest to us in Unity, although some people like different kinds of rituals, but that was one of the things he was famous for, was just kind of knowing about how to do all the rituals, religious rituals, correctly, in a precise way. There's a story that he was visited by a Mongolian shaman who wanted to learn from Pythagoras, but who also taught Pythagoras. According to the legends, he taught him something called the stillness of ecstasy. Maybe it should be the ecstasy of stillness. But in any case, it's one of the things the Pythagoreans were famous for was in their initiations was going through long periods of silence. So they would not speak. According to the legends, for up to 5 years, initiate would not speak. And I find that extremely difficult to believe. That's the most difficult thing for me to believe, is that a bunch of philosophers could keep their mouths shut for 5 years. It just doesn't seem plausible to me. But in any case, that's what the story is. They established various dietary restrictions. It's not clear what all of those restrictions were. At minimum, there were they had, as many cultures did, there were certain animals they would not eat. Some records say that they were actually vegetarians, except that they would not eat beans. And the Greek comic writers had a lot of fun with the fact that Pythagoreans wouldn't eat beans. I'll let you make your own joke here. It'll probably be very similar to the kinds of jokes that they told. Pythagoras, as I say, basically taught what we would think of today as geometry and arithmetic and music theory. He figured out the mathematical ratios of tones and how to put them in a way that would make what we think of today as the construction of music, if you will. And one of the things that they were famous for is that Pythagoras understood the nature of harmonics in such a way that he would use music as a therapy. So he's kind of the first musical therapist as well. He knew how to play certain kinds of tones or melodies that would bring calmness to people who are in states of anxiety and stress, which, as you can imagine, was quite a healing experience. And this may be where the Pythagoreans got their reputation as healers. The Pythagoreans, in addition, would contemplate certain sorts of paradoxical sounding statements that Pythagoras was famous for. A lot of those sayings were collected over the years. One of the things he said was, "Do not sit on a bushel," which reminded me very much of the saying of Jesus, "Do not hide your light under a bushel," possibly having something like a similar meaning. But again, the meanings aren't clear, and that's the point of contemplating them, to see what kind of meaning or insight emerges from these sort of sometimes strange sounding sayings. Pythagoras said, "Do not go by the public way." And you might recall that Jesus said, "Salute no one on the road and strive to enter by the narrow door." I think these are ideas about withdrawing from the common ways of thinking and being in the world and discovering, in effect, your own way, discovering your own light and living according to that light, something along those lines. But in any case, you can imagine how it's not unlike, it's not unlike what the Zen Buddhists do, where they contemplate paradoxical riddles. And the point of these kinds of sayings, the obscurity of them, you also find this in Taoism, the obscurity or the paradoxical nature of the sayings, is that it pushes you beyond your rational mind. Because generally speaking, there's no right, rational, logical answer that you can formulate. It forces you to, well, it doesn't force you to, but I guess we say maybe it exhausts the rational mind, right, and can bring you into a state of higher consciousness that transcends our sort of linear ways of thinking, our conventional ways of thinking, and opens us up to new insights. Well, whatever the purpose and effect was, we can see certain similarities in the way that Pythagoras taught and the ways that Jesus taught. Some of our words, even today, come from those original Pythagorean ideas. The idea of, for example, harmonics in music theory, or the idea of living harmoniously. That's part of what we get from the Pythagoreans. The words rational, a ratio as a mathematical idea became the word rational. And so there are a number of other ideas that have sort of stayed in currency. You may have heard of the expression, the music of the spheres. That also comes from the legend of Pythagoras. According to the stories, when he went into deep contemplation, he could actually hear the sounds of the planets moving in the universe and the music that they made. And that was the idea of the music of the spheres. So they were the Pythagoreans were very focused on mathematics, not kind of in the way that we think of mathematics today, but more as ideas that are the foundation of the universe, the foundation of everything. I think more or less what the Pythagoreans had in mind was that any shape that you look at has geometric proportions of different kinds, mm-hmm, right? And we've learned actually over the years more and more about how those interesting proportions show up. So they thought of number as points. So a single point would be one, or the idea of unity. 2 points would be duality, and so on. And they associated numbers then with what we might call metaphysical or mystical or spiritual ideas. So the numbers weren't just geometric shapes. They weren't just arithmetics and mathematical formulas. They were also symbols for higher foundational ideas of the universe, divine qualities or divine ideas, as we might say. So a couple other things I'll just mention about Pythagoras that might be of interest to you. One is that he was considered an expert on what happens with the soul after death. He was a believer in what was called then metempsychosis, but we think of commonly today as reincarnation. And so he taught that the soul is immortal, and that the reason to live a harmonious life was that your next incarnation will then be more harmonious and more pleasant. So the more you follow this way of life that brings harmony and order, the higher you rise sort of on the reincarnation scale. Pythagoras thought that there was a divinity in all humans and even in animals. And he referred to God sometimes as Father. So we can see already, we can start to see what some of the connections are with this this religion and philosophy from 2,500 years ago to the current, to some of our current ideas. The Pythagoreans in contemplation attempted to attain a state of ecstatic insight. So they were pursuing a sort of what we would call today a mystical experience through the contemplation of truth as they understood it. So a very interesting, as I say, a very interesting past organization that has some connections with many of our ideas today. In fact, the Pythagorean philosophy was influential long after Pythagoras died and long after the Pythagorean community was disbanded by the Roman emperor. It had existed for about 1,000 years, and then the Roman emperor, who was a very zealous Christian, decided that they needed to be shut down. Pythagoras himself, no one really knows how he died. What we do know is that his community buildings were burned down by people who were hostile to the way of life and the Pythagorean ideas. So as advanced as they were, you can sort of understand that because these ideas were so advanced, it encountered a certain amount of reactionary resistance to the point of burning down the building. So we don't know if Pythagoras died in the building. There's some stories that he escaped and went elsewhere, and so we don't really know for sure what his end was. But nevertheless, Pythagoreanism itself continued to influence philosophy. One of the interesting things, one other connection with the sort of scientific worldview is that Copernicus, who worked out the math and theorized that the Earth moved around the sun rather than the other way around, the Copernican theory, he got his idea, the suggestion for that idea, from reading old text by Pythagorean philosophers, because that's what the Pythagoreans believed. Not that the sun moved around the Earth, but that the Earth moved around the sun. And so Copernicus famously did the math, and the rest is history, as they say. Even some of the most modern and the most insightful physicists have pointed out that our picture of the universe is the scientific picture of the universe is basically mathematical. So there's that other sort of connection between the ancient mathematicians and our modern physics, especially. So after the community was destroyed, we see that some of the ideas carried on to some degree in Christianity and in philosophy, but kind of what was lost, there was a couple of things lost. One was eventually that idea, the Pythagorean idea of sharing all things in common and having a community that's kind of more like a big family. That idea has been experimented with in different places at different times. But the connection that the Pythagoreans made between what we would call today mathematics, but also metaphysics and mysticism and healing, that dimension of Pythagoreanism really kind of disappeared after the Pythagorean community was basically suppressed until the 19th century, when New Thought started up again. Because what we find in New Thought is not the mathematics so much, but the ideas of metaphysics and mysticism connected with healing. And there are some certain sort of metaphysical ideas that are very similar to what those Pythagoreans were onto when we get into New Thought. So, for example, one of the ideas is that ultimate reality is based on ideas rather than ultimate reality being material objects, a sort of usual notion of what reality is. Certainly the idea that there's fundamental mathematics that the universe conforms to is very similar to the Pythagorean view. But what we're talking about when we talk about that, really, we're just talking about ideas, what in Unity we would call divine ideas. And so as we focus on divine ideas, we can gradually rise into a mystical consciousness, a consciousness of the oneness of all and oneness with everything. And as we contemplate those ideas like harmony and order, we can experience greater health and even healing. And so that's part of what New Thought was about fundamentally, what unity is about. That reality is founded on ideas rather than matter. And so, being founded on ideas, we also naturally make the association that the fundamental reality is mind. So mind and its ideas, that's fundamental to New Thought. That's fundamental to unity. The Pythagoreans, I didn't mention, believed also that numbers had qualities. So one of the obvious ones is the number 1 is associated with oneness and interconnection and love. Maya, you look like you have a question.
No, I'm playing with your numbers.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you were wanting to ask a question or make a comment.
No.
So, okay. So one interesting thing, connection with unity, is that Charles Fillmore was aware of some of the information about the Pythagoreans, and we find him referring to that in his writings. So one of the things that Charles Fillmore wrote was he just sort of described Pythagoras. He said Pythagoras taught that the universe is God's symphony, and that all the suns and planets sing as they swing their way through the heavens. And then Charles went on to say that the whole universe is in vibration. Each particular thing has its rate of vibration. So here's one of the mathematical descriptions, because a rate of vibration is basically a number, right? It's frequencies, and different frequencies correspond to different colors of light that we perceive. They correspond to the different tones that the sounds that we hear. All sound and all light can be measured in that way. You can go deeper and talk about the mathematics of atoms and molecules, or the probability mathematics of quantum events, but you get the picture. And so Charles was attuned to that, recognizing that there's some kind of connection between divine ideas and the vibrations of the universe, especially in terms of how they might be mathematical. And Charles also noted that an eminent British astronomer, I think here he's referring to either Sir Arthur Eddington or Sir James Jeans, one of those two, because it sounds like could be either one. But he said an eminent British astronomer says that he discovered that God is a great mathematician. And the logical conclusion of all wise philosophers is that everything in the universe, both seen and unseen, is under mathematical law. The very hairs of your head are all numbered, said Jesus. Well, Charles saw a connection between physics, Pythagoras, and the teachings of Jesus by talking about the hairs on your head being numbered. When I read that passage again, I never realized, oh yeah, Jesus did say that idea about the things being numbered, and I never really sort of made any kind of connection between that and God having a mathematical mind. But that would have to be the case of God. In my case, it doesn't take that long to count the hairs, but anyway, the hairs on my head. But anyway, that was another connection that Charles saw. And then finally he said, when we know that every word is mathematically linked with certain creative ideas, and that divine mind has made it possible for every one of us to draw upon those ideas mentally, we have the key to all creative processes. Now, Charles didn't really work out what those mathematical links were and that sort of thing. Sometimes he just, in a sort of inspired way, would say things and then move on to his next point without necessarily unpacking them, as we say in philosophy. But it's really interesting, this idea of a word being mathematically linked with creative ideas, and we can see that in the name of our movement, right? Our movement is named after the number 1, unity, oneness. And that's something that we can understand at a very deep level, what oneness is. What the Pythagoreans were saying, what Charles was saying, is there are also other connections of ideas with qualities, if you will, of number, or of number ideas, mathematical ideas. The main thing to get from this, really, I think, is that what Pythagoras was saying and what New Thought is saying is that there are these perfect ideas of order and harmony. In Pythagoreanism, the number 3 represents harmony, right? Order, harmony, that these ideas are the foundation of the universe. They're the foundation of what you are. The sort of my ultimate nature, your ultimate nature, is not seen in our bodies or our personalities or the words we say, or even necessarily the things we do. The ultimate reality is that we are perfect, orderly, harmonious ideas in divine mind. And the goal of new thought is to realize that, right? The goal of unity is to realize, to discern that underlying perfection, starting with certainly how we think about ourselves. Maybe you have not lately had the thought, well, I'm a perfect idea in the mind of God. Maybe that hasn't been the kind of thing that's flashed through your mind, or maybe that's something that you do focus on every day to realize that truth. And as you focus on that, if you recognize that you're perfect, that everyone around you is also perfect in the divine scheme of things, it puts you into a state of acceptance and also an ability to discern good behind whatever appearances there may be that you might judge as less than good, to perceive that perfection in others. And that's the secret of spiritual healing, is seeing the perfection, the underlying harmony and order in your consciousness, in your body, and what you really are, and also being able to see that or perceive that in others. If you can perceive it in others, you can have a healing influence on their consciousness, on their bodies, on their conditions. As long as they're open to that, as long as they're sort of cooperating in that, we can have a positive influence on the world around us without maybe people even realizing that we have that effect, or that or us recognizing it. Simply maintaining that consciousness changes the mathematical vibrations around us, if I can put it in those terms. So you're a perfect, harmonious idea in divine mind. And these sorts of thoughts can lead you to that higher experience of that sort of ecstatic, intuitive, indescribable experience of the underlying harmony, order, fundamental unity, love, bliss. Words cannot describe that experience, that transcendent experience. This is a kind of thing that can happen not only in deep meditation, but really in any moment as we focus our attention on that. New thought from its earliest writers like Horatio Dresser and Emma Curtis Hopkins, up to later writers like Joel Goldsmith and, of course, the Fillmores, all had this dimension in their teaching that sort of the ultimate goal is not this or that, work or this or that success. The ultimate goal is a realization of oneness. The ultimate goal is the knowing, the consciously knowing of our divine connection, that we are the infinite and perfect mind expressing in us, as us, and through us, that we are, as what Walt Whitman said, that more is contained, there's more in us than is contained between our hats and our boots. Charles wrote that God is an omnipresent mind enfolding and interpenetrating all things. There is goodness, everlasting, and joy beyond expression in a perfect union between your mind and this perfect mind. Now, you suppose he was making that up, just making that up, or if that was something that he knew from experience. I suspect he had those moments where he recognized that oneness and experienced that joy that he couldn't describe and that feeling of union. I suspect he had those experiences, and that's what he's speaking from. And that's, and we say, I've been quoting from Charles Fillmore, but you could just as well find Myrtle referring to these ideas, these mystical ideas. So one of the things that she liked to teach was that the metaphysical laws are like mathematical laws. They're principles. They always work if we apply them correctly. And she would emphasize that the proper application would get results just as certainly as doing mathematics correctly, but you have to do it correctly. And so that's what a lot of her pastoral work was really about, was helping people re-envision their lives, re-perceive their lives, think in new productive ways rather than counterproductive ways, to just deal with those issues one at a time. And that's sort of the great value of her work, is that if you go back and revisit Myrtle's writings, you may find her addressing someone who has an experience that you're going through and you're trying to figure out how to deal with this. Sometimes Myrtle can offer some very useful insight on how to transform things. So one other idea I just want to kind of squeeze in here is that I talked about the Pythagoreans as having that community where they held everything in common. Charles recognized that in the Book of Acts story of Christianity and the teaching of Jesus, that our grasping or covetous ideas mislead us and create problems for us. And in fact, he wrote this, that the remedy for all the ills to which the flesh is heir lies in conformity to the divine law that Jesus revealed to his followers. It is said of these true followers that they were of one heart and soul. Not one of them said that aught of the things which he possessed was his own, but they had all things in common. So long as the idea of covetousness is lodged in the human mind as its dominant generating factor, there can be no successful community life. That idea must be eliminated from the mental plane first. The next step, the outer practice, will then be safe and successful. Everything belongs to God, and all his children are equally entitled to it. So those are some fairly dangerous words from Charles Fillmore, writing in the 30s. But that's the way he saw things, and you can't really arrive at any other conclusion when you realize that everything is interconnected. That I don't just have sort of my little section of air that's mine and that I need to hoard. The air belongs to everyone. The water belongs to everyone. The earth belongs to everyone, sort of equally. But until we recognize that, until we get over ideas of grasping and covetousness, we're going to remain in these states of conflict rather than having the distribution of the unlimited wealth of God, which is not just the earth, but the creative ideas, that all of that belongs to all of us. And when we realize that, all of us will be deeply enriched. At least that, I think, is the direction or the idea that he's trying to express there. So I think that it's important for us as members of this mystical, metaphysical community, the heirs to not only the teaching, the original teachings of Jesus, but heirs also to that ancient Pythagorean community. It's important for us to set our sights and hearts on striving for this consciousness of oneness that's reflected in our name. Let us continually affirm our oneness with God and all good. Let us seek to continually dwell in an awareness that we are one with God, one with all people, and one with the universe. From this perspective of unity, we will attune to the music of the spheres. We will radiate harmonious vibrations wherever we are. We will be instruments of healing of our souls and our bodies and our homes and our neighborhoods, our places of work, our nation, our world. And so I invite you to leave this meeting and this time together immersed in that idea of divine oneness, that you are one with all and you are a radiant instrument of divine harmony and order. Thank you.
Thank you.